Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. And be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. Ross Jackson's with us. Canal Street Chronicles, Locked on Saints. Let's talk some salary cap. Where are you starting? All right, we know that Breeze and Easton are already off the books.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we starting from there?
So I start first with restructures. Restructures is the first place that I go because that's going to open up the most amount of money for you immediately. Now, the Saints have to be salary cap compliant in less than a month. They have to be salary cap compliant on March 17th when free agency officially opens, not the 15th when all the tampering begins.
Dude, they got so much work to do.
They have a lot of work to do, but it's doable. So I start off with restructures. And remember that when you restructure a player, you're taking basically their base salary cap or a portion of their base salary cap. You're turning it into a signing bonus, and then that way that signing bonus can spread out over either the remaining years of their deal, or you can add additional years to the deal and then spread it out over a course of 5 years. So if you take $10 million of somebody's base salary, instead of that costs you $10 million in 2021, it costs you $5 million if you've got 5 years. Excuse me, $2 million if you've got 5 years to spread it out. So I start with Michael Thomas because when you restructure a guy, you're pushing their money to the future, right? So you're basically doubling down that these are players that you want in your franchise. Mm-hmm. That's why the Saints have never been afraid to do that, because their first intent throughout free agency is always player retention. They always want to bring in their in-house free agents first. So Michael Thomas, Teron Armstead, you could even go with Andrus Peat. I know a lot of people just groaned. That's okay. You can go with Andrus Peat. You can go with DeMario Davis. You can go with David Onyemata. These are 5 contracts, a handful of contracts that you can restructure. And in the very least, you're saving around $4 million with each of those, but also upwards of $9 million or close to $8.8 million when it comes to Michael Thomas. So you're looking at, with just the restructures, the ability to save somewhere around a good $20 to $25 million. Okay. Between that and the moves that have already been made, that's half of what you were over just with those 5 moves. That's the first place that I go.
Okay. So from there, then it's obviously going to be guys that are just cap casualties. So there feel like some obvious ones. Who are those for you?
So there is an additional step in between, but the cap casualties that I look at, you're going to, if Drew Brees retires, he'll probably be designated as a post-June 1 cut. He's already saved you $24 million. By the end of the story, assuming he retires, then he'll actually save you 25 because you get that additional million that's on his base salary right now. A couple of the cap casualty guys that you can look at are Malcolm Brown, the interior defensive lineman, who is really, really good for the Saints. It has been really good for the Saints. There's also the opportunity to just rework his deal instead. So either way, you can save some money on him. But he's due $5 million this year, 4.9, but $5 million this year. So you can either cut him, save that full 5, and then go to maybe some of these younger interior defensive linemen that the Saints have been talking to throughout pre-draft meetings, or a very swollen interior defensive line free agency class, which there also is. Or you can re-sign and even extend him so that you can knock down this year's number and then pay him more toward the back of the deal, something that the Saints are very accustomed to. Another player to keep an eye out on, I don't know that the Saints would do this, but Emmanuel Sanders does save you money. $4 million if you cut him outright, $6 million if you designate him as a post-June 1 cut. And then there's also the opportunity, again, to rework his deal instead of cutting him. Mm-hmm. One other player that I'll mention, Quan Alexander. It's tough to cut him before free agency because he tore his Achilles, so you can't cut him while he's on injured reserve until he passes the physical. But you could restructure his deal, rework his deal, and either build that into an extension because he's going to be on the books no matter what in 2021 with his injury guarantee. So that's the way to go with some of the potential cap casualties.
With Quan, he's because the year is voidable, right? So he's got $13 million or so. But but they could cut him, and that all goes away. So what portion could they save?
They could save probably, I think it's going to be around the $11 to $12 million area once he's healthy. The thing about it is that none of the money is guaranteed, so they can move on from him at any point after he passes his physical and he's eligible to be cut. That's the really key portion of it. They're not going to be able to move on from him before free agency, very likely.
Okay. All right, so you said there was a middle step as well from restructures to the cap casualties. What's that?
The middle step is extending players like Ryan Ramczyk and Marshawn Lattimore off of their 5th-year prices. So both of them right now are in the final year of their rookie deal, which is a non-guaranteed at this moment, fifth-year option, which for one of them is about $11.2 million. The other is about $10 million, $10.8 million, somewhere around there. And so with each of them, you can save anywhere between $3 to $7 million just by extending them early, as opposed to allowing them to play on that fifth-year option in a contract year. So you can extend both of them now, backload their contracts, as the Saints are apt to do, give them a nice signing bonus so that they're getting paid a bunch of money right up front, but it's spread out over the course of 4 or 5 years on the contract, and then give them a low base salary. You can give them a low base salary of $1.75 million, but then, or $1.075 million, but then give them a $10 million signing bonus, or even more than that, $15 million signing bonus, let's say. And then they end up walking out of that situation in their first year with $16 million in terms of the cash value. But for the Saints, that signing bonus is spread out over the course of a couple of years, however many, 3, 4, 5 years that they want. And so that would lessen their cap hit over that time. So you keep them in New Orleans, which is very important because Ryan Ramczyk might be the best player on your team. And then you have your cornerstone at the cornerback position in Marshawn Lattimore, but you also save money while keeping both of them in New Orleans. That's a really important one. You can do that same thing with Quan Alexander. You can also do something similar to that with Taysom Hill to knock down that $16 million cap hit. His around $11 million, $10 million salary, you can spread out over an additional year on the contract and do the same thing with him.
Do you want Taysom Hill in an extended contract?
Well, this is the interesting thing because you can extend the contract but make it a voidable year so that he still gets paid there. You take on a little bit.
The old Nick Fairley trick.
That's right. So, you take on a little bit of dead money once he's gone, but if it's going to be $4 or $5 million, which is pretty nominal, and you've managed what your dead cap is going to look like pretty well so far going into 2022, you might be okay with that, to where if he's not on your roster, you're not swimming in dead cap at that point.
Ross Jackson is our guest, a Locked On Saints podcast every single day, and of course the Canal Street Chronicles. All right, so you went through restructuring Thomas, Armstead, Pete, Davis, Onyemata, probably saying farewell to Brown, Sanders, Quan, although there are some caveats there, extending Ramczyk, Lattimore. When you hit the bottom line, how much money with all of those moves? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with those 10, 11 moves there, how much money are you saving? Is it enough?
Yeah, so at this point, this is where it gets you just below the salary cap. With these moves, you're probably right at about either $1 or $2 million under the salary cap. Then you can start talking about some of the additional moves. Is it time? Is it time to move to Blake Gillikin as opposed to Thomas Morstead? If that's something that the Saints are interested in, or even Thomas Morstead is interested in, that could be a post-June 1 designated cut that saves you $3.5 million. And then you can also talk about, remember, restructuring contracts means doubling down on players. If you feel like you want to, continue to commit to Cam Jordan, which I think many of us believe is a good idea because of what he's been to this franchise, you can also restructure his deal, and that alone saves you up to about $8.5 to $9 million. That alone can put you, those two moves alone can take you from being even with the salary cap to having $10 million to spend in free agency without having, an overloaded contract, an overloaded roster at all, where you could still make a bunch of changes. As we know, the Saints can do a lot of work with just $10 million.
Hey, before you go, one of the rules in radio is don't do numbers because numbers confuse people on air and all that sort of stuff. So we just basically broke that rule. I don't really care, though. What players, if you had to guess today, what, I'll use this term loosely, marquee players that are on the roster now that you think are not wearing the black and gold in 2021?
Ooh, good question. The ones that I think are most likely, the ones that I feel like have the largest chance for that to potentially happen, I would watch Janoris Jenkins just because of that salary cap hit. He can also rework his deal, but Janoris Jenkins would be one that I would watch, the combination of age versus returns. Thomas Morstead would certainly be one that I would consider marquee to watch. And then see if I can get you one more. Another really interesting one that is already hitting, the one that's already hitting free agency outside of Trey Hendrickson would be Sheldon Rankins. I would watch to see if the Saints are going to be able to maintain him, and if they do, what's the price point on it? Because I think it might be less than what people might expect because of that swollen interior defensive line class that's out there and the injury concerns. It might end up not being too hard to get him to stay in New Orleans. And based on some of the things I've heard him say on this very station, he seems like somebody that's very excited to stay in New Orleans anyway. So I think that you could see, a good deal there.
Rankins, Trey Hendrickson, Marcus Williams. We all know the list, man. It's going to be they will be juggling a lot of balls at once this offseason there in the Saints front office. It's all getting underway. Ross Jackson, Canal Street Chronicles, and, of course, the Locked On Saints podcast. Make sure if you listen to podcasts, you're subscribed up however you get your podcast, Locked On Saints. He's our compadre there on the Locked On Network, and our bald and beard compadre as well. Hey, man.
Yes, sir.
Always a pleasure. Have an awesome weekend. Thanks for a couple of minutes.
You as well. Absolutely. Y'all stay safe. Thanks very much for all your work.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.